Aloha and good afternoon. It's Thursday, March 5th, 2026, and it is 2:34 p.m. Will the Committee on Government Efficiency and Customer Services please come to order? We have with us our committee members Cordero and Nishimoto. Pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute, Section 92-3.7, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda when each item is taken up in two ways, in person in the council chamber and remotely. Before testifying, each person shall state their name for the record and will be limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. All persons who registered to testify in person will be called upon first. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to testify following the registered testifiers. Once in-person testimony has concluded, I'll proceed to remote testimony via video conference or phone. When I call your name or the last 3 digits of your phone number, please follow the prompt to unmute. As both English and Hawaiian are the official languages of the state of Hawaii, pursuant to Article 15, Section 4 of the Hawaii State Constitution and HRS Section 1-13, members of the public may testify in either language. For oral testimonies offered in Olelo, Hawaii, additional time, as may be necessary, will be allowed for the testifier to provide an English translation of their testimony. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires that all votes at a remote meeting be conducted by roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, I'll first call for objections, and if there are any, I'll call for a roll call vote. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described in the posted agenda. And as a courtesy, please turn off or silence all cell phones for the duration of the meeting. First item is agenda item number 1, Resolution 26-20, accepting a gift of travel, hotel accommodations, meals, and related expenses valued at $5,874 from the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators for representatives from the Department of Customer Services and the Department of Information Technology to attend an in-person site visit to the Arizona Department of Motor Vehicles in Phoenix, Arizona from April 20th to 23rd, 2026. Members, please note that we posted on the agenda a proposed CD1 to the resolution identified as OCS 2026-0077/2/10/2026, 8:07 a.m., and a summary of the amendments is listed on the agenda. We have with us the Director of the Department of Customer Services. I also see the Director of Information Technology here, if they would like to provide comments.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Dos Santos-Tam and members. Kim Hashiro, Director for the Department of Customer Services. We appreciate your support on this resolution. This trip that is being fully funded by the association, the National Association of DMVs, will enable the Department of Information Technology and CSD to understand at a very detailed level what is possible to move us off the mainframe and into a much more modern platform. So the mainframe currently houses driver's license, state ID, and motor vehicle registration systems, as well as other systems, but those are the primary. And all of the records for these systems reside on the mainframe. It's important that we move it off the mainframe. It is an old legacy system. It's not supportable in the long term, and it's important that the city takes steps now to move to a more modern environment. Visiting the Arizona DMV, they've implemented a system called MAX. This is something that Director McKee has discussed with them, and they're willing to share their open source code for the back end of the system. What we need to see also is how they utilize it on a day-to-day basis, operationally, what the customer experience is, and what it took to get them from an old system to a modern system. And I think we can learn a lot from this site visit.
Members, any questions? Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you, Chair Dos Santos-Tam. Hi, Director Hashiro. I was just wondering if this is one of those types of systems that we need to be uniform across all the other counties as well?
Yes, so the other counties, they interface with the mainframe. They're utilizing the same driver's license system that we use. In fact, you'll be hearing more shortly about our upgrade to our driver's license system and our new card production system. But the other counties rely on the mainframe also, so it is a statewide initiative.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much for that clarification and information. Are we further behind than the other counties in implementing this or looking at this, or no?
Well, it's one system, it's a statewide system, so the other counties would benefit from it. Honolulu is the lead. DIT actually supports and maintains the existing system. Brian has some very limited staff that can do this. The programming language is something called COBOL. It's not readily known by more, I guess, the newer IT professionals coming out into the field, but he does have staff now, although they can retire. So we want to be proactive about
okay.
this and not wait.
Understood. Thank you. Yes, retirement. That sounds great. I was wondering. I was wondering. I'm actually really grateful that we're bringing up this efficient way and taking the lead for the rest of the state. So thank you, and thank you, Chair Santos-Tam.
Of course. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, Director, thank you. We'll now proceed to testimony. Clerks, do we have any registered testifiers, either online or in person, for this item?
Chair, there are none.
And how about remotely?
There are none.
Okay, there being none, members, we are in discussion. Any discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, the chair recommends Resolution 26-20 be amended to the posted CD1 identified as OCS 2026-0077. Any further discussion, objections, or reservations? Hearing none, the resolution's been amended to a CD1. The chair recommends that Resolution 26-20 CD1 be reported out for adoption. Any objections or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Moving on to agenda item number 2, this is Resolution 26-26, accepting a gift of travel to the city that encompasses travel, hotel accommodations, meals, and related expenses valued at $2,900 from the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, AMVA, for a representative from the Department of Customer Services to attend the 2026 AMVA Leadership Academy Conference in Arlington, Virginia, from April 13th to 17th, 2026. Members, please note that we posted on the agenda a proposed CD1 to the resolution identified as OCS 2026-0126/2/27/2026, 9:17 a.m., and a summary of the amendments is listed on the agenda. We have again with us the Director of the Department of Customer Services, Kim Hashiro.
So this gift, also provided by ANVA, is to enable our DMV administrator to attend a leadership workshop. He has been attending other ANVA-related workshops and conferences, and as the division chief for the DMV, it's really important that he participate in what is being done and discussed nationally, as well as bring that information back to Honolulu. So his ongoing participation in conferences like this is critical, and I hope that he is able to continue to participate, learn, and grow.
Great. Members, any questions for the Director? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to testimony. Clerks, is there any registered testimony? Do we have any registered testifiers on this item, either in person or remotely?
Chair, there are none.
And seeing nobody standing by, we'll close testimony. Members, we're in discussion. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, the chair recommends that Resolution 26-26 be amended to the posted CD1 identified as OCS 2026-0126. Any further discussion on that recommendation? Any objections or reservations to amending to the posted CD1? Hearing none, the resolution has been amended to a CD1, and the chair then recommends that Resolution 26-26 CD1 be reported out for adoption. Any objections or reservations to the recommendation to report out for adoption? Hearing none, so ordered. This brings us to our informational briefing on the processes and platforms the Department of Planning and Permitting utilizes. A copy of DPP's presentation was distributed, and it's also available online as Departmental Communication 148 of 2026. We have with us the Department of Planning and Permitting's Director, Don Takeuchi Apuna, and as they get this on the screen, I'll note that this is a follow-up to a presentation that was made back in September after the rollout of H&L Build, And at that time, I thought that it would be good 6 months later now to get an update on where we're at and a little bit more detail. So I want to thank the department for coming and presenting this information to us. And so take it away, Director.
Thank you, Chair. We really appreciate this opportunity to provide an update to you. It's interesting hearing what customer services is looking at as far as changing out some of their systems, and they're at the very beginning of their journey, and we're more than halfway through ours, so many lessons learned, but these types of enterprise changes are massive, and we're glad that we're here, that we can explain how this whole process has been evolving. Yes, we're here to talk about processes and platforms that we are using. So first, on the first slide, these are the platforms that we are talking about specifically, beginning with our e-plans, which is Evolve. And to take you back a little, from 2022, we were beginning to require that all of these building plans became electronic, no more paper, and it took a while to phase this out, but that was accomplished. And we also upgraded our e-plan system, which was important, and it was a long time coming. And then, of course, H&L Build, that was launched August 4th of 2025, and we continue to refine the system. And then lastly, CivCheck is the artificial intelligence that we're using to help improve quality of plans coming through. This is our technology, and again, as we've been saying for the past 3 years, technology, processes, and people are how we are fixing the department, and all three of these go hand in hand. So even now with these technologies that have been put into place, there's a constant refinement of the technology. There is reworking of the processes with the technology, and we need the people to help make the implementation happen. This is just a timeline, just really general of where we started. So back in 2022, 2023, we were assessing what are the issues that we had in the department and how were we going to address them. As I mentioned, e-plans, we needed to upgrade the e-plans and make sure everyone was using electronic plans versus paper. And we began in 2023 to select a vendor, vet a vendor, procure and develop. And the same with CivCheck. We had a pilot program, procurement and development. In August of 2025, H&L Build went live. CivCheck also at the tail end of 2025. And now, as we move forward, there's continued refinement and enhancement of both H&L Build and CivCheck. Notably for CivCheck, we have begun to take CivCheck, have CivCheck run through the residential for 1 and 2 family projects, and then by summer or so, commercial will be running through CivCheck as well. So I just wanted to provide context to what we're doing and what this means, similar to, Department of Customer Services when it comes to these major changes in the technology. Here are some of the industry standard implementation realities. Enterprise, very large, complex permitting systems require phase stabilization periods. Legacy data reconciliation is expected and necessary. When review processes are standardized in a new digital system, there are temporary impacts to application queues while staff and users adapt. Specific to this, we did shut down for a week because the pre-screen did have a backlog, and we simply wanted to close down the front desk so that staff could focus on the pre-screen. And these are just normal adjustments when implementations happen. And then contract refinements and scope adjustments are part of responsible project oversight. I think there's rarely contracts that aren't, re-looked at in advanced phases of implementation, make sure we're on the right page, things shake out, and things might change, and a contract can be amended or changed or adjusted. Early operational friction is common in major technology modernization efforts, particularly in complex, highly regulated environments like permitting. So I think we're talking about change management. It is difficult to go from a system we've all known for 28 years and to go through some discomfort in order to really adopt and use the new system as we did the last. All right, so next we're going to move to the contract itself. And I have Abe Toma, who is our applications platform manager, who's going to go over these next few slides.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair, committee members. My name is Abe Toma. I'm the Application Platform Administrator at DPP, and basically in that role, I've been providing oversight for the projects that Dawn previously mentioned. So one of the questions that was asked of us, and what I'm going to try to explain a little bit, is the contract structure for the project, the H&L Build implementation project, and how we manage that implementation. So I'll try not to get too deep into the weeds here, but the mechanism in which we procured the product and services was agreement called the NASPO Value Point Master Price Agreement. Basically what that is, it's a pre-negotiated price list of goods and services that all government agencies are able to utilize. The benefit of using a price list, a master price agreement, is that it streamlines the negotiation process, because all of these goods and services are pre-negotiated to provide best rate when you are purchasing or procuring that good and service. So that's just a little bit of background on how we did the procurement for this project. So the contract itself, the structure of the contract itself, there's what they call a prime contractor. So our prime contractor was Carasoft. You can think of Carasoft like a general contractor, right? In a construction setting, they basically oversee the overall project. The contract is with Carasoft, and they provide administration for the contract itself, billing, those kind of administrative roles related to the project. They had two subcontractors, Carasoft did, for this project. One was a product vendor, and one was a services vendor. So our product vendor was Clarity. So you may have heard the term, the word Clarity before. That's actually the name of the software system that H&L Build is built upon. So Clarity was the vendor who provided that software. And what they do on an ongoing basis is we procure our licenses, our system licenses through them. They manage the platform, so updates at the platform level are managed by Clarity. And then Spiridion is the vendor who did the implementation. So they are our implementation vendor. And what that means is, all of the configuration, all of the development that went into launching H&L Build was provided by Spiridion. Their team worked with our staff through the initial discovery, development, testing, rollout, post-go live support, and then we will have a contract with them for managed services, which is sort of like the ongoing support services that we need as we continue to evolve the system, and as well as like a help desk type of support where if we have questions or issues, we can go to them for that kind of support. So throughout the course of this project, that is the contract structure we used. We have always been sort of following that contract from implementation, from the beginning of the implementation project, the kickoff, through post go live, and until now, all of these components, the whole project has sort of been structured under a contract that we've procured through this mechanism. The next slide I'm going to talk about has to do with, and there was a question about data migration and some of the issues that we had around data migration. I want to highlight that as well as one other kind of the key issues that we experienced when we went live with HNL Build back in August. So data migration was one, and we did identify issues around data migration. So I want to talk about that a little bit. What basically happened was after we went live and we were utilizing the system, we identified that there were data sets, data records, data statuses, and things of that nature that were either missing in the production system or incorrectly labeled. And so that caused issues where people couldn't find the right data, the data or information, or things weren't where people expected it to be. And so I want to explain a little bit about why that happened. So one of the key parts of an implementation project is mapping data from your old system, so in our case POSSE, into our new system, HNL Build. Those two systems were significantly different in terms of structure, the way that they were built, the way they were managed, and the platforms that they sit on. POSSE was a very customized piece of software, so if you can imagine, something that was built 28 years ago at that time, sort of the state of the industry was you build, right? So everything is kind of coded, custom coded as you're creating your software. And so over 28 years, POSSE became sort of this very large enterprise system that had a lot of different components that had been built over time. HNL Build Clarity is much different, and that's currently where we are in terms of technology systems. It's more modular, and it's what they call COTS, commercial off-the-shelf type of system. So it's basically built so that you can get up and running relatively quickly, and you don't really develop, you don't really code on it. You configure it to work in the way that you need it to work. And so those two differences in sort of philosophy and construction creates a lot of mapping issues. The way that something was called or named in the old system and the processes in which that information was provided, you would need to figure out how to translate that into the new system, right? And so, 28 years, we had terabytes of data and literally thousands of different data fields and processes that we had to weed through. And so that was one of the issues, right? As we went through, we work with the vendor to identify all the different data components, the different fields that we use, and we talked to them about how we utilize it, our workflows that we utilize, and they did a mapping exercise, and we went back and forth quite a bit on this. But with that much data, with that many fields, there were types of data that were missed in that process. And I would say that, of course, that's not something we would want, but it's not uncommon either. I think large data system projects, you do have these type of growing pains. And so, the other part that, I mentioned testing, the way that we did this project is we basically utilized and leaned on our DPP staff to help us with, telling us how they work. And then once we got the program configured, we would ask them to go in to test it, to try to make sure that it's working properly for how they work. But these are planners, these are inspectors, these are engineers. They're not, computer scientists. They're not data specialists. And so, to ask them to identify every single potential mismatch of data as they're looking through screens and screens of workflow, I think that it could be, it is expected. I was not, it was expected that we would have some of these issues. And so, that's just, in hindsight, I think, for sure, there are things that if we were to do it again, we would try to do it differently, but that's what ended up happening. What we did, though, as we identified these issues in the system, we would we set up a process in which the staff could immediately contact our internal technical support team, as well as a vendor team that we did have on site for a time post go live. And so we had very immediate feedback from the staff, and we were able to go back into the system, identify what the issue is, remap, and re-upload. And so that was the fix, right? We would identify where the problems were, and then we would fix the data, re-upload it, and that would correct the issue. And so that was the process we went through. And then following that, we would have our users test again to validate that the whatever error occurred was fixed. I would say that we identified most of those issues in the first month or so after go live, and we corrected it within that time frame. Periodically, we still identify little pockets of information where we're finding that maybe there's a mismatch in the data, the labeling is incorrect, and this is going to be something that we have a process for identifying and correcting, but it's much less common. We rarely deal with that at this point. So I think although we struggle with it post go live, we have a pretty good handle on it at this time. The second issue that I just wanted to bring up really quickly as we're talking about sort of the challenges that we had around the H&L Build go live was this idea, excuse me, of account management. So one thing that's very different about H&L Build compared to how we operated in the past, H&L Build operates like most common technology systems today, where you have to create an account to be able to utilize it. We didn't have the idea of accounts previously. You didn't have to log into anything to be able to submit an application, to be able to see the status of your information. And so when we went live, there was this huge rush of people saying, okay, I need to submit my application, or I need to see the status of my application, and therefore I need to create this account. And so, the other difference is all users now who would potentially want to access our information, not just the applicants, but if you're an owner and you want to get access to a permit that's related to your property, or if you're a contractor who's going to be doing work on a particular permit, all of those users, to be able to fully utilize the system, we're asking for them to create these accounts. And so we recognize that this was going to be a major push at go live. We're talking about thousands and thousands of users trying to get into the system, especially right after go live. And so, we did, skipping down to the bottom here, one of the responses or the preparation we made for that is we put together what we call a surge team. So we had staff, we pulled in staff from different areas of the department who could help us just after go live, but it ended up being for some months where they would be helping us with those requests that came in. You may be familiar, we did set up various support mechanisms for people to call in or email us to ask for help, whether it was account creation or if they were having some kind of issue. But as we were getting those types of requests in, we would be trying to respond to them as quickly as we can. When the volume was really high in the first couple months, and we'll have a slide on this kind of showing kind of the trend of the account creation, it did take us a little bit of time just to kind of keep up with the amount of requests that was coming in. And, we did take a little bit more time than I think, maybe some of our customers would have liked, but that was sort of, with the resources that we had available, we were moving it as fast as we could. But at this point, we have a much better handle on it. We have some dedicated resources now who are assisting with this, and our turnaround for account requests are basically within 1 business day. So there are no more delays on getting somebody into H&L Build at this time. So those were kind of the key issues that we were dealing with right after go live, and I wanted to kind of share about that. But the other side of that, the other side of the conversation that I did want to share about is kind of the why, right? What do we benefit from by launching into a system like H&L Build? Director Puna mentioned, the fact that we had, we've embarked on this major technology initiatives that is going to help us not just today but into the future. And so, there's a lot I think that we are sort of are very excited about that the benefits that the systems are going to provide. And I want to talk about that just really quickly because I want to show the whole experience that we're providing at DPP. So just basically kind of talking about what we, recapping what I mentioned earlier, This is a move from a 28-year-old technology system to very much a modern system. Clarity is actually built on Salesforce. Salesforce is used by millions of companies across the globe. So it's very modern, and it's always going to be something that's going to be kept up to date. And so by doing that, we definitely increase our ability to be agile. How do we support a system like this? One of the challenges we had with our previous system is any requests, because it was so customized, any requests, any modification to the system had to go through the vendor. We now have the ability to do a lot of that maintenance ourselves. So we do have what we call in Tier 1 and Tier 2 support in-house at DPP. So we have staff who are able to take those initial requests and make a lot of those changes on our own. And so that's going to be something that we're going to be able to benefit from in the long term. We are considering it now. It's not something that we've decided on how we want to manage this, but we could technically manage the whole system. And there's what I'm calling Tier 3 or advanced support, where we're actually doing our own customization and development within the system. Basically, all we would need is to have the right type of certifications on a Salesforce developer. And so that's a possibility, right? So that's one of the benefits that we have for us to be able to fully utilize the system. Risk mitigation is a second benefit. We had a very old code base that and even at the time where we transitioned off of it, the underlying Oracle database that our data was sitting on was outdated, could not be updated at that time just because our code was so old. And so there was a lot of challenges maintaining the system. The next thing is in terms of transparency. Because now we're giving the ability for owners, contractors, all of those types of users to log into the system, they can kind of self-serve. They can see, log in, see statuses. One of the big things I think we've had complaints about is that, or an issue is that often the applicant, the person who submitted the request, submitted the permit application, was a contractor. And so the owner wouldn't necessarily know where things were. And so they would call us, or they wouldn't be getting information from their contractor. So now they have the ability to do that. So that's a big one, I think. And then scalability. We actually have the ability to interface with a lot of other systems now with our new technology. And we've actually added on the process side several other agencies who participate in permit review, application review, and so they can join us instead of having to go to a different department or a different state agency to get an approval. That can all happen within our workflow. So we have the opportunity to expand on that. That's something that I think is really exciting. As well as technical integrations, right? So we can pass data much more easily between systems. We have hooks and APIs that most modern systems can connect to, and so we can share data that way. So that's something that I think we're going to be looking at leveraging and expanding on. This next slide, really quickly, I don't want to, I know I tend to talk a little bit, but just a real, a table to kind of really quickly show sort of the benefits of and compare to what we had to what we have today. The transparency I talked about, more access for other user types. One of the big things, I think one of the biggest things that we haven't really talked that much about is that we have more than 60 application types in H&L Build. Prior to H&L Build, other than building permits, everything had to be brought in on a piece of paper, and you had to fill out a form or submit things in paper. We've transitioned almost every type of service and application that you would submit to DPP into H&L Build. And so whether it's a trenching permit, a land use permit, a planning application, a special inspector license, all of those things can be submitted, reviewed, and provided through H&L Build. So I think that that's also a huge benefit, and I think we're going to see a lot of benefit from that moving forward. I talked about security. I talked about the support that we have and that we can do on our own, as well as the integration that we've already started working on with other agencies and organizations. And the last big one for us is the ability to do much more robust reporting. A lot of the data that we talk about, we're actually able to pull directly out of the system, and we can create our own reporting. That's not how it worked previously. Most of the reports that we pulled from our previous systems were pre-built, and by the vendor. And so if we needed to have a different type of report, we'd actually need to go through them and pay for them to create reports for us. And so that was something that we're just scratching the surface as a benefit. But we can see now very clearly where something is in a process. Are we getting stuck on certain types of applications? Are we getting a backlog in certain phases of workflows? That's stuff that we can pull very quickly and will, I think, ultimately lend itself to additional process improvement. And then the last part for me is this last slide is actually referencing back to the account creations that I had mentioned earlier. So as you can see, right after go live in August, we were managing 2,000. We did 2,000 account creations in the first month, and then there was and this is expected, right? As people are getting into the system, that number goes down. We're anticipating that we've sort of leveled out at 600-ish new account creation requests per month. We are anticipating that will last for maybe a year or so as we kind of cycle through all the different types of people who will work with DPP, and then after that, it'll just be a few here and there as there's new users who come to DPP who need services from us. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, so thanks, Abe, for that on the contract and H&L build details. So moving ahead, this slide we did present earlier this morning, but just wanted to, as part of this, to show how our processes have been affected or not affected by H&L build. You can see that we are certainly taking in more applications and catching up on some issuance, but these are all building, not just building permit, but all permits that we issue. Okay, and I'll talk about solar after that. Let me see. Sorry. Okay, so solar, this is very interesting. I think a couple years ago when we were talking about solar, solar was 60% of our residential permits. That has come down a bit since then. It's more roughly around 40%. So just giving you an idea of where we're at now, there was the big push in October, November, December because of the tax credits expiring. But as we said this morning, we are able to issue the quick permits for solar. So that process is going very well with H&L build. Another process, I know, Chair, that you were interested in was the sign permits. And so based on your suggestion, we have worked out from, at least initially, to cut down some of the requirements to make it easier for companies to get their signs approved. So that's one streamlining. And that made sense as part of H&L build now working, like how sign permits before were not coming through POSSE. It was a paper process. So we're implementing through H&L build and adjusting specific to sign permits. That's different than a building permit. And so this process of refinement based on the type of permit within H&L build will continue so that we can be faster and more effective. The next is CivCheck, our AI. Just really quickly, we had our first look applicants, which was architects and consultants who commonly do residential 1 and 2 family projects, and they ran their projects through, good results, and then we launched CivCheck on December 8th, allowing people to use the system. And we have now, we have 64 accounts created in CivCheck that people are using. And recently we had a training with AIA, BIA, and other industry members to let them know to try out CivCheck, because it seems to be working as intended. And so have had 39 building permit applications that have run through the CivCheck AI. And so based on that, the kind of smaller group of applications that have come in, we're able to provide some data. So the green represents the CivCheck applications versus the orange as non-CivCheck, but similar types of applications that we're, as opposed to 1.6 pre-screen cycles, it's down to 1, and a total number of review, this is the code review, where you have an average of 2.3 cycles, it's about 1.4 under CivCheck. And the number of corrections are greatly reduced. Total corrections that we were looking at on average 23.2 down to maybe 8.8. And then the time with the city is reduced as well from 68 total days to 33. So we will, as we said, we have opened it up for residential 1 and 2 family projects. At some point, we will make it mandatory that all residential 1 and 2 family run through CivCheck before submitted as a building permit application. And then in the summer, we will open it up for commercial permits. So that's in development currently. Next, enforcement. Just to give you an idea of how we're doing, the 2025 violations are broken down. What was interesting to myself was that we do more than a quarter of the violations are sidewalk violations, which is very interesting. And that's historically been the same throughout. But total number of violations, 2,300. We have increased our lien substantially in the last year, and where we were averaging 20 per year, we more than tripled that, and we'll continue to lien on a regular basis. The Zoning Board of Appeals, there continues to be a backlog, but we have been working with CORE and have come up with some ideas to really make sure that what is going to the ZBA are true ZBA cases, and maybe we will look at fine review as part of the department. That will be an option, so they don't need to go to the ZBA, and we think that will make a significant impact. This escalation ladder just gives you an idea of how we operate as far as the order of enforcement, from violation to order, and then lien, a DMV holds, letters to mortgagees, and then individualized attention. That just means a property, its owner, there might be certain circumstances that we need to look at specifically in order to enforce more effectively. And then we have a possibility of injunction with CORE's assistance, and then of course foreclosure. But what is important for this process is that it be standardized and timely so that you know exactly when these things are coming down, and that's part of the challenge that not a challenge, but that's the plan that we're working through to make sure that these things happen very timely so that people feel the enforcement rather than let it drag on indefinitely. Short-term rentals, just an update. The number of R5s for 2025, 1,044, and notices of violation are 79. I think a lot of these violations are repeat by the same operators, so we are looking at ways to deal with these repeat offenders. And then lastly, anyone can submit a request for investigation through H&L Build for short-term rental or any other violations that they see. So that is the end of our presentation. We are available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, members, any questions? Councilmember Cordero.
Sorry, that was a slow reaction. Thank you, Chair. Okay, Director, thank you for the updates. I do have a question for, I believe, Abe's part when he was presenting about the mapping issue. So I just want to clarify, just so that I can understand it myself, that the mapping issues were based off of just the differences in the softwares and how it read the data because of the different labeled data sets. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's correct. Just a basic conceptual understanding. You know, even when we as staff through the years have inputted data into Posse, right? Some of that wasn't always consistent or clean, and we have massive amounts of data. But yes, basically where it sits and how it needs to connect into the new system, it might not always have a receiver that is exactly being sent from the original, from Posse. So there, you know, it might not get there, but that was working out how it should fit, how it should connect. But like I said, sometimes the data itself isn't clear, you know, wasn't labeled correctly, and so it was going into places that didn't make sense.
Are you still seeing or fixing different labels currently, or were you able to catch those ahead of time?
So sometimes I think what we're dealing with at this point, most of it has moved over, but there are people will say, "Oh, I looked in this permit and it's missing. It should have this information." So then we can go back and determine, okay, this didn't move over for whatever reason, and then we can make the fix.
Okay, understood. May I also ask if either you or your team could please elaborate on the dedicated resources that are now dedicated to helping people with H&L Build? Is that through the Tier 1 and Tier 2 support system, or is that just your internal thing, or is it already just staff, DPP staff that's set to help people make accounts or with their accounts and other parts of H&L Build?
Yes, that's a good question. We hired a person to handle all the H&L Build emails, the technical issues. So that person is in-house. And then we also have other IT-related personnel in-house and a CSR from DIT that helps with continued support.
Okay, I was actually going to ask about that integration between DIT and also with all these, I don't know what you call them, the contractors, contracts. Okay, anyway, yeah, all of them that are offering your support for H&L Build and everything. Okay, and you answered that, so that's good. And for the, I totally get the Tier 1 and Tier 2, and then the advanced support is Tier 3. And so are the Tier 1 and Tier 2 support also in-house? Like they were trained by the teams that were here when H&L Build went live? Or are they like just Honolulu DPPs, like dedicated 24/7 peeps at one of these contracts that we have to answer all your questions?
Yeah, yeah. So we have in-house a small team, but that is comprised of both DIT CSRs as well as our own DPP staff. And when we say Tier 1 and Tier 2 support, that's things like account requests or login issues. That's Tier 1. Tier 2 are things like I'm catching an error, or I don't know how to submit this type of application, or there's some kind of issue with submitting this application. That's kind of Tier 2. So our staff has been trained, both trained by the implementation vendor as well as through their own personal training. There's a lot of online training resources for Salesforce-based software. So they've sort of gotten themselves up to speed using those mechanisms. And then tier 3 is where we go and we escalate to Spiridion for their support. And that is typically if we need to make a significant change in the system, we need to update a workflow, or we're having some kind of like, maybe there's a ordinance change and we actually need to change the way that we're collecting certain information. That would be the kind of thing that we would escalate to the vendor to make those changes. But as I said, that's stuff that we could do if we decided, in time, maybe working with DIT, do we want to bring in our own Salesforce certified staff and then, take on those types of projects. But at this point, I think it makes most sense for us to manage the, sort of quick fix type of things and then work with our vendor for the more advanced type of support.
Thank you. And it's good to hear about the self-service reporting and also the, I literally was just thinking of what I was going to mention to you earlier, but self-service reporting and, the accounts, making the accounts so that they could just ease the follow-ups for where their application is. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Santos-Tam.
Thank you. Councilmember Wire, any questions? If not, I have a few. Going back to the chart of Carasoft, Spiridion, and Clarity. 6 months ago when we were here, there were a lot of, I think, questions about Spiridion as the implementer. And part of the response was this hypercare phase. Are we still in the hypercare phase?
So we're not technically in the hypercare phase anymore. But one of the changes to the way that we're working with Spiridion is that we had identified items that we determined to be part of the original scope of the project. And so we required them, or we worked with them to make sure that those components were implemented before we rolled off of their implementation team support. So that's what we had been doing probably through December. They had been helping us update certain components in the system. And then we're wrapping that up. And in the managed services contract that we're moving forward with, we also have the ability to do more enhancement development type work. That's going to be a part of that contract. So we've always had and we'll continue to have Spiridion support for that type of work.
So parsing your answer out a little bit, you mentioned that because of these issues, we're able to look back to make sure that they were implementing everything in the original contract. Mm-hmm. If we didn't encounter these issues, would we still have been identifying all of these things that they were supposed to have done?
So the process in which we came up with that list is, so I think I briefly discussed, we have a process in which we're intaking all of the different requests and different reports from our staff. And so we've, what we ended up doing is there's what we call a JIRA ticketing system where we're using it for issue management, bug management. So we've created a list of all of the different reports that came in. Through those lists, as well as other reports that we're getting from our staff, we identified the things where, okay, this is functionality that had been requested in the original scope of work, and we want to make sure that that's completed. So we had come up with a list of priority items that fit there, and those are the items that we have been working with them sort of to complete, to finish in this last few months post go live. I don't know does that answer your question?
Yeah, and so now moving forward, what is Spiridion's role? Does their role as the implementer end now that everything's been implemented, or do we have them around for?
Yep. Yeah, so they are also our managed services contractor. So they will be doing that sort of tier 3 support for us. And so we have a contract that we're putting in place. That was also actually part of what the original proposal and contract included, that post go live implementation, post hypercare, when we move into managed services, Spiridion would be the provider for that.
And so is this a new contract or an amendment to the existing contract?
It's a different contract, but it's under, maybe I'm not saying this correctly. It's part of our original contract, but it's a different component of that contract that is specifically for managed services.
Was that developed before the launch of H&L Build, or was this done in response?
Yeah, that was included in our original discussion with H&L Build. I'm sorry, with Carasoft, and it was built into our budgeting and for the project. We had to execute that component of the contract separately, after the implementation. So, but it was something that was always in the plan that's how we would extend our managed services.
And what additional costs, if any, have been incurred after the August launch of H&L Build?
So one of the things, and so that list that I was talking about of additional things that we've identified, on top of the things that we determined were in scope, there were a lot of things that came up where, we couldn't really fully recognize until our staff was actually in the system. We were actually processing applications, and then we could figure out, oh, wait a minute, this kind of thing, it would work better if the process worked like this. And so we've been discussing with Spiridion for their assistance on those items. And so it hasn't been finalized, but we're working on an additional budget, probably in the $200K range for these additional enhancements that are based on our better understanding of how the system currently works and how we want it to work in the future.
And we're going to see that next week in the budget presentation, the additional $200,000.
Yes, it should be in the budget.
Okay. And given, though, that our Carasoft is the prime contractor, what is their role in all of these changes? It sounds like we're negotiating directly with Spiridion. Does Carasoft have any role in these negotiations? We pay Carasoft, right? Or to what extent are they kind of involved in the nitty-gritty?
I mean, from what I understand, right, they pull the Clarity and Spiridion together. They manage the contract. They're kind of like the administrator of it all, whereas, yeah, Clarity is the software, Spiridion is the implementer, Carasoft is the manager of this, package. Yeah. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I can add a little bit more to that. So the discussion about what actual changes we need to make, that happens with Spiridion. So when we're talking to the developers, the implementer, it happens with Spiridion. Once we come to some type of agreement on, this is the work that we want to do, then Spiridion will then work with Carasoft as their prime to say, this is the change that we want to make to the contract. Then that amendment proposal will technically come from Carasoft to us, and then we would do kind of our contract changes based on that proposal that is provided by Carasoft. So as Don said, they're really just kind of administrator, but that's how we interface with them. We also talk to them directly to let them know, when you submit your amendment, we need these components included in that, in your documents to make sure that it meets our procurement requirements, et cetera. So, we work with them at that level, but all of the specifics of sort of scope go through Spiridion and then to Carasoft.
And I have a number of sort of detailed questions about exactly how this arrangement works. I won't bore the committee with those. We'll put them in writing. But I wanted to ask now, well, actually, Councilmember Wire, any questions? Okay. Legacy data. So we are now off of POSSE, but I imagine, to Councilmember Cordero's questions, there is some data perhaps in there. There may be things like legacy agreements, developer agreements, or master plans for subdivision, things like that, that are very specific. How is that old data being maintained if we should ever need it? Are we keeping all of it? Do we have a POSSE server somewhere that's still alive?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and you have a very good understanding of what DPP is doing. So POSSE is still available, and actually, let me just kind of explain a little bit of how we went live. we took 7 years of what we call production data, and that's what we loaded into H&L Build initially. 2 years of production files, so that's kind of to maintain our storage capacity on the production server. We're actually right now going into a process where we're implementing what we're calling an archive server. It's a different server, but that's where all of the historical information will sit. And so we eventually, I don't know, sometimes it maybe give me more detail than you need. All of H&L Build still has access to all of that information. So if I'm a user, if I'm a staff person, I'm trying to go back to 2010 permit or application, I will have the ability to search for that information through H&L Build and see the archive data through that same interface. So I guess, sorry, long way to answer your question. Yes, that information will also be available. And we do still have Posse active. It's in a read-only state, so we're not making any updates there. But if for some reason we need to go back right now to find older data, that's how we get to it.
Okay. And so if the production data is only 2 years old, and I remember this morning we had a chart. It was that chart with the big red column about some of the longest lead time permits. Are any of those still being processed outside of H&L Build?
No, so anything that's being processed, if for some reason we need to process something that didn't come over in the initial migration, we grab those specific records and move them into production. So if the staff identifies that, hey, I need to work on this old subdivision, this existing subdivision permit that was opened back, in the early 2000s, but we need to go back and do some updates to it. We do have the ability to go back, grab that data, and then bring it over into H&L Build. After the archiving process that I talked about happens, all of that will be available in H&L Build. So we will not have to do sort of this, Posse data, H&L Build data distinction. Everything will sit in H&L Build.
Good. Members, any other questions? Okay. Well, I wanted to thank the department for this. I think there are some bright spots here, certainly compared to last September. I think that's very positive. The increased number of liens and the enforcement side, I think that is a success story. I look forward to working on the signed permits further. There's probably some other areas that we can work on to take the burden off of just permitting in general. So thank you for this update. I think it is very helpful for the public and for us as we keep monitoring the modernization of the department.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Members, any discussion on this item? I believe we do need to take testimony. So clerks, are there any registered testifiers online or in person, or anyone waiting online or here in person to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, there being none, thank you everyone for being here today. There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned. It's 3:37. Mahalo.